it very much. We're just going to give people 1 or 2 more minutes to join, and then we will get started. All right. Again, welcome everyone to the Public Safety Drone Review. This is a collaborative effort with Drone Life and Drone Responders. I'm Miriam McNabb, editor at Drone Life. My co-host is Tim Martin of the Regional Training Center. With us today is Chief Charles Warner of Drone Responders. We have Lee Newman of the London Fire Brigade, drone team manager there. Thank you so much for joining us from London. I know it's late there. And Brett Kanda, drone industry veteran. He's a familiar face. He is Senior VP of Business Development at Aerodome, a new entrant to the DFR space. We'll hear more about that later. So welcome, everybody. Before we get started, as always, we want to remind everybody that our guests are not paid to appear on the show. They don't pay us. We invite the people we think are of most value to you. However, if you would like to sponsor an episode, please let us know. We'll be happy to put your logo up. And thank you for supporting us. Before we get started, Charles, one announcement. Important thing. We hope that we will see everyone at the Drone Responders Conference. What's the official name? What's the official dates?
Yeah, so the Drone Responders National Public Safety UAS Conference will be held on March 12th and 13th, 2024 at Busch Gardens, as it was last year, in historic Williamsburg, Virginia. Last year, we had 300 people in attendance and 100 people on a waiting list. We're expecting over 400 people this year, so it should be exciting and twisting Lee's arm to come over and be a part of that conference as well. And we just hope everybody sees it. If you want information, go to droneresponders.org, and at the top of the page, you'll see the banner for the conference. You can get all the information for registration and so on.
It's really well worth it. I was there last year. It is dense, information packed, totally focused on public safety. So a lot of value for the public safety community there. All right. As always, we're going to get started by talking about some of the news stories that are out and about on Drone Life, but also just throughout the web, focused on the public safety community. And we're going to discuss those and kind of see where things are going in the environment. So I want to start with the first one, which was an article from GovTech. Axon and Dedrone are partnering to work on beyond visual line of sight flight, right? So in the public safety context, there's a lot to sort of unpack with that. For anybody who's sort of just stepping into the drone industry, if you fly within visual line of sight, depending on how big your drone is, that can be, you know, a few hundred feet to a mile. So that really limits kind of the scope of what you're able to do. So let's kind of start with that one. What are the inferences here? What are the implications of requiring ground infrastructure?
So let me start first. So DFR, as we see it, we've seen most organizations have gotten a BVLOS waiver. But let's be clear, it's really an extended visual line of sight operation because there still requires visual observers on a roof or somewhere. The key component to the advancement of DFR is going to be getting away from having those visual observers and true beyond visual line of sight. So I think this is the key of what Axon and Dedrone are working toward.
Right. And because but on both, you know, both on the West Coast and here in Boston on the East Coast, you are not having somebody stand out on the roof, you know, 365 days a year. It's not safe, it's not practical. It really limits the application.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that, Miriam, if you'd like.
Please.
I mean, just kind of paint the picture and set the context of DFR from, 2019, which is really when it got started, to today. The biggest economic hurdle is staffing and having to put, visual observers on the roof, RPIC on the roof. Yes, you can teleoperate, and that's the future of DFR. But today, most of the budget's being spent on humans on roofs, which has all the normal human flaws of limited amount of time that you can be up there. Like you said, it can be really cold, it can be really hot, not exactly a great environment for people to stand up on a rooftop. Chula Vista is lucky that they're in San Diego and, basically have 365 days a year of being able to do that. And, having worked for the FAA for about 3 years, I kind of learned how they view, these different safety requirements. And if we were to zoom out just a little bit on what Axon and Dedrone is doing, it's really an effort to replace the visual observer's eyeballs on that roof. So, I see this coming at a couple different angles of sensors, combination of radio frequency, combination of radar, a multiple PTZ cameras. There's a lot of different things you could use. At the end of the day, the FAA has to feel comfortable that that sensor and the notification system is more reliable and safer than a human eye, and that you have redundant safety measures behind it. So that's really what this gold rush to DFR is. That's really why this is happening. And value is truly unlocked in this use case when you remove that human from the rooftop and be able to hit certain nautical mile radius around each station, or be able to fly true beyond visual line of sight of 3-4 miles, somewhere in that world. That's when you start to really see response times drop. You can actually operate 24/7, 365. So I think most of the industry is trying to kind of figure out how DFR is going to look in 3 to 5 years from now. But Axon's a very forward-looking company, and this is, the path that they're taking to get that VO off the roof is using a Dedrone, really safety system around a city.
I think the one other piece too is the dock, is having the ability to have the drone in a dock, in a reliable dock that can launch the drone, receive the drone, recharge the drone, and make it all functional. That's still all those pieces are what need to come together.
And we're seeing that, of course, internationally. I just published a place today. Dubai bought another set of the Aerobotics Optimus systems, the drone in the box systems. They're situating them throughout the city of Dubai for public response, for emergency response there. Tim, chime in here about tactical waivers and why that's different. That's different than like a BVLOS, a true BVLOS waiver.
Yeah, when you talk about what Brett just mentioned about looking 3 to 5 years in the future, I don't know if this succeeds and we have a true beyond visual line of sight DFR deployment, all of that could drastically change. And I think if we're talking about going 3-4, I think we're going to move more towards these newly developing VTOLs, where quadcopters may not even be the future. So it's an exciting future, and the tactical beyond line of sight waiver right now is basically that patchwork to allow law enforcement and other public safety agencies to get to that point where they can fly from the ground. And now we're not talking about rooftop deployment. We're talking about trunk of the car deployment in an emergency, on scene. We need to get on this.
We're losing you a little bit on the audio there, Tim.
Low altitude into a backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the key difference there is it's 1,500 feet laterally. That's the limitation. And 50 feet within the highest obstacle.
So I know, in our country, we are going to have to unlock BVLOS, not just for public safety applications, but really for many industrial, I won't say most, but many industrial and commercial applications to become economically viable. Lee, what are you seeing, in London, in that context? You're in a very, very urban area. you know, what are the rules? Are you just flying visual line of sight because you get value from that right now, or how's that working?
Yeah, I mean, but working in London is very chock a block. It's like working in New York or any of these high-rise cities. We don't tend to do any BVLOS flying within London. I know there's push for the police to start. I think they're looking into it, and I think, as Tim mentioned, I think going forward, you're looking at the fixed wing sort of long flight time drones. Obviously, if you're operating outside of London, I know like a few years ago there's a big fire in Lancashire, and they had drones, but not obviously long duration ones. But definitely there you could have done with the BVLOS flying because it's such a wide area of fire that you could have quite easily have used the BVLOS stuff. But I know it's again there's a guy called Stuart Lawless who's very active now for the Met Police. You probably would have met him in Chula Vista, yeah. So
we actually spoke to him on the show.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we got
I forgot he'd been on, but I know that he's paving the way for a lot of. It seems to be more of the law enforcement that are paving the way for BVLOS. I think the fire will follow, but to be fair, our operations are very different. So you know, it'd be interesting to see. I've also been approached by another company. I can't obviously say, but what they're planning on doing is flying medical supplies from hospital to hospital. So that would be almost like autonomous and BVLOS. So they're all the sort of applications for BVLOS flying that are going to be coming in the future. But obviously, if that one starts, and as I was talking off air, you've got then all the Amazon deliveries and then all the sort of deliveries to contend with, and going forward, it's going to have to be a very tightly monitored world. If that makes sense. So yeah, that's basically it in London. It's a very different beast to anywhere else outside of London. But yeah, they're definitely coming in, that's for sure, at some point.
It is and I think that it's relevant to sort of mention, of course, London really is a unique situation because it's such a dense city. It's so highly populated. So, you know, when we talk about drone delivery and stuff, it's definitely starting kind of out in the suburbs where you're not in quite as cluttered an environment there. So yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one. Lots to think about that. I think we're going to be following that for a long time with sort of what the sensors are, what the new technology is, as Brett mentioned, to sort of replace that visual eye of the pilot. The next story we had was sort of relevant to the military, but I think I have heard this come up in the context of public safety before. So we're usually speaking about how public safety can use drones to respond to emergencies, but what about the situation where somebody's out there using a drone to commit a crime and public safety has to respond? So obviously in this country, we have issues with regulations, just as I must always do when we bring this topic up. It is not legal to mitigate any kind of drone activity unless you are a member of the Department of Justice and have very specific permission to do so. So any counter drone tool that you have, you cannot use for anything other than identifying and tracking. And that includes law enforcement right now. So they are sort of looking at that and thinking about whether or not it's appropriate to change that so that law enforcement could potentially mitigate a drone or bring a drone down if a drone was committing a crime. What do you guys think about this?
Well, I served on the detection and mitigation ARC with the FAA. So there's been a lot of discussions about how do we move forward with that. But I think I'm also on the Counter UAS coalition with the major athletic people and all those organizations. And what we've seen is that Congress is very hesitant to do anything. And so we're locked, and we're hoping that we don't lose the authorities that are already in place. But an example would be the NFL said in 2022, they had over 2,000 drone incursions during their live football games.
And they're starting to shut down play, which I think is going to be the crowd will go wild and sort of attack the operator if that happens too often.
As well as Major League Baseball and some others.
Yes.
But then they also reported that there were some 100,000 requests for mitigation protection of which only 0.05% were able to be honored because that's all the resources that are available. I think the key component here is that with what we've seen in Ukraine and what we've seen in Israel is that the war game with the drones has changed, is a game changer. The war as we know it is not going to be the same in any fashion going forward. But a lot of Congress say, well, we're concerned, we want to wait and see what happens. But we've already seen the dropping of things into prisons. We've seen in South Carolina where a drone actually helped an escape from a prison. We're seeing interference at the border where they're using them to avoid the Border Patrol units to get people across the border. So we have things here, and the cartels have used it against each other with some explosives, as well as transporting drugs and fentanyl across the border. So the issue of if it's here, no, it's not if, it's here.
I think the other thing to point out too is, I've spoken to Abby Smith. I've heard her on panels, and one thing that the panel pointed out the last time I was able to hear her speak is that the rules now are so strict that the military can't even test counter drone measures against. I mean, the military can't do it. Because it's so closely defined, so that might be an issue.
Yeah, and Miriam, if we kind of roll back the clock and look at the history of this tech, we're coming up on year 9 of the UTM concept. There was about a 1.5 year period there where we were out in the Nevada desert with NASA, every counter UAS company, and everybody when it came to UTM was on the same page. You can't have true UTM until the FAA and or law enforcement agencies have the ability to take a drone and move it out of an area where they're not supposed to be. That is going to take a lot of collaboration between the FAA and the FCC to get that to happen. There's a lot of spectrum overlap. There's a lot going on there, but this has been going on for a long time is the point of that statement. And I'll never forget my childhood, one of my best friends growing up, Dan Magee, who's the founder and former CEO of Citadel Defense, the counter UAS company, called me up because I was the only person he knew in the drone industry. And he kind of said, hey, I have this idea. What if I could move drones through RF out of, either take them out of the sky or initiate return to home? I was like, that's probably $1 billion idea. And, maybe it didn't quite hit $1 billion, but pretty darn close.
Yeah,
it's not
it will.
This is not a technology issue. Like most things in our industry, this technology exists. They can be very precise from an RF perspective on bringing drones out of the sky. This is really, again, a regulatory, overlap problem. But it's absolutely critical to the concept of UTM. Exactly what we're talking about. It like Charles was just saying, there's a lot of really bad things happening with drones as well as great things, but those bad actors have to be mitigated. And I've had plenty of nights here in Vegas because I think about how close you all have flown into Las Vegas, how close McCarran is to the Strip. And in the summer, how many people want to put up their drones to get pictures of the pool party or the fountains or whatever it may be, all while you have tour helicopters orbiting around the Strip. Oh, and don't forget, Nellis is about 15 miles north of McCarran. So there's just this crazy amount of activity. What scares me is somebody losing control at Mandalay Bay, on West Approach coming into McCarran. You have a rogue drone that's up there and nobody can do anything about it. That's cool that you can detect it, and that's great. It's there, but that's not really going to help you.
Right.
If it gets into the way of an approach. So this is a multifaceted,
Well, there's one more piece to it, is that the laws are so strict, they don't even allow a very clear understanding of detection. Even the detection part of it is problematic because it's like, what can we do? What can't we do? And Congress will not specify. They will not clarify and open that and clear it up. So it's tough.
That's a lack of understanding, don't you think, Charles, of how RF works?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lee, what's happening? What is the fire doing? Because here, I'm publishing, I kind of don't do them all anymore because I would be doing that every single time there was a wildfire anywhere. Please don't fly your drone over the fire, like you're interfering with, firefighting aircraft. So what do you guys do if you see somebody who just thinks it's cool to take footage of the fire?
Well, not so much bystanders, but back in 2017, there was the Grenfell Tower fire. I don't know if you remember it. High loss of people. 72 people died in the tower fire. We turned up on the night because I was there for another reason. But we turned up, and their drones. This is actually when our drone program started in 2017. But in the UK, kind of, there's a few departments that are using it, but there's you didn't see many of them about. But when we was at the tower, we noticed that the press was starting to use them, and the press was starting to fly the drones into the tower for whatever. I can only imagine why they were trying to fly them into the tower to get their snaps for the paper. But that was the first time I'd really been sort of annoyed about something, because the police didn't know where they was coming from. They could have been anywhere within that radius of that tower. And that was my first foray into I call them press pests flying their drones. So fast forward a few years, and there's two incidents. One, I was at big warehouse fire, flying our drone. Another little drone comes buzzing over. So as standard procedure, I just ground the drone because I don't know what that drone's going to do. Ground our drone, safety first. And I'm a little bit of a hothead as well. So I was just like marching off. Where's this drone coming from? Because obviously it's stopping us doing our work. Police were there. They said, look, we found a drone operator. I said, mate, what are you doing? He said, oh, I'm trying to get some pictures. I said, yeah, but I'm trying to work and this is my job. I'm trying to help, sort this fire out for the officers to give them some situational awareness. He said, yeah, but I'm trying to get, I said, I don't care. And I said a few other choice words, can't repeat one there. Obviously, watershed's not done. But the police, as I was saying to Charles, they didn't have powers to be able to move these on. And there was no detection avoidance system. They couldn't get rid of them. And there was one, I won't go into the last example because it was quite bad. It was basically a fatal fire, a young family, they'd all passed away. And my friend actually commandeered this drone pilot and said, do not fly your drone anywhere near this scene of operations. It's really highly sensitive. There's a lot of stuff going on. Anyway, the geezer did it. He flew it, he put his pictures on Twitter, and it just went ballistic from there. So we reported it all the way to the CAA to say this has got to stop. And it's getting worse. And this is, I know this is a different example from what getting drones away from football stadiums and stuff, but press drones are really becoming an issue with incidents of high sensitivity. And that's where I reckon this counter drone stuff needs to block them, send them away or whatever. It is a good talking point, and it's one that's just going to get worse.
I think there also has to be a law so that the police do have something to say,
Yeah.
down that drone or we're going to arrest you, because, on a fire, whether it's a wildfire, the FAA issues a TFR over the wildfire. So, but they have time to do that. Whereas if it's a building fire,
But
that process probably.
But even if we do a
doesn't
TFR, we
happen.
don't have authority to take the drones down or to arrest the individual. That's still a federal rule.
Yeah.
We can do things with local and state laws. So, for example, if you're interfering with an incident operation, we can actually stop you from doing what you're doing.
Mhm.
So there are things we can do, but they're very limited, and it's very confusing. The one thing I'll say about this, lastly, is that the authorities that are in place are currently under a continuing resolution. So at the end of November, if we don't have another continuing resolution, those existing authorities will go away unless some other action's taken.
Just to back up what Charles said, the police, there is a law, it's the 2016 Emergency Services Act around drones, but A, you've got to find the people flying the drones in the first place, and B, you've got it's not really full scale in the police yet. Some do, some don't know. It needs a bit more time to sort of filter down to everybody, and then you'll start maybe getting some prosecutions through illegal drone flying. But it's going to take time, basically.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
interesting going, real quick, a point of that,
Go ahead.
we're almost going back in time in the early days of counter drone. There was a company called Airspace, and one of the things that Airspace developed was a cannon that shot out a small drone that would then shoot out a net. And then they would have the air-to-air net that would capture the drone. And when you talk about what we have available to us right now for counter drone, when you look at what's going on in Ukraine, is really a net is, is the only thing that's going to stop a drone from getting to a certain area. And that was a tactic back in World War II, was to use netting to shield, at that time it was for visual shielding, but it'd be a shame to think that we haven't made much more progress since airspace and what they were doing with nets to capture drones. But that's where we're at. We haven't made much more progress there.
Seriously. All right, so we got time for one more. Lee, what was the story that you said was relevant? Which one was that? Do you remember?
I think you posted something about, I can't remember now, about the FDNY. I think it was bringing new tech into I know there's a high-rise fire one, which I thought was quite interesting, because the amount of videos I haven't seen for the high-rise fire drone extinguishing, I'm just one of those at the moment. But I don't know if it was all related to that. Actually, it was just basically bringing new tech, and I think the FDNY had tried drop-in mechanisms for rescues, and that was what the video was. I give to Tim actually. We tried that. You know what firefighters are like when you're sitting around a table, like, what can we do? What can we do with a drone? It's like, let's attach stuff to it. Let's drop stuff with it. So we tried it all, and we did successfully drop it like a few years back. But I just like seeing the advancement of drones. And basically, I know that this I don't know what the others got to say, Charles and that, but I've seen a lot of videos about drones putting out high-rise fires, and I don't know. I think we're going in the right direction, but the amount of water you need to suppress a high-rise fire is ridiculous. I mean, you need drones as big as helicopters to pull the hose up. You need some big drones to pull up the water. But as I say, I think we're going in the right direction. But no, not anytime soon. What do you reckon, Charles, for these high-rise firefighting drones?
I think if you had something that's a relatively small fire that you could access, it would probably be okay. But like you said, I think the volume of heat and everything that's going forward, the amount of water that you have to carry, the weight, and the water going up that hose is problematic. I think that it's a great thought. I'll be glad to see it really be effective and go forward. I think the place you might see that happen the quickest, if it's going to be working, is probably someplace like Dubai, who controls airspace, has the government approvals, and can get it done.
So they're doing it in China, EHang, right? So EHang is it's more like an unmanned helicopter kind of thing. So that size, it can take passengers, and they are using those vehicles for emergency services. So, for example, if you could have like an uncrewed ambulance helicopter which could go to an emergency site, and they have demonstrated it for high-rise fire. So it is a larger aircraft, but
I mean, it's probably got a use somewhere, but in a city somewhere, where it's just like flying something that big around, landing it in the tiny streets of London and stuff like that. It's just
right.
And then you also have kind of the wind tunnel activity in those high-rise building areas that create their own weather conditions. So it's not just as easy as flying other things. So
it's a clickbait. It's a clickbait article. I mean, the amount of water you got to carry, the pressure of the hose, not to mention you got to fly something above 55 pounds if you really want to do this the right way. That's a non-starter conversation with the FAA in most cases. I mean, I can't tell you how many companies that I've talked to, I've worked with, that are building firefighting drones. Huge,
right?
5,000 pounds, 6,000 pound. They're going to go deploy and dump water and replace themselves. None of those companies are still around. So I don't see it in the next, call it 5 years.
All right. So it's
don't hold your breath.
I didn't put it on Drone Life.
She does this on purpose.
All right. So we have actually cool things to talk about too, other than the news. So let's get started with Brett, if that's okay. So Brett, you I first met you. You were at FLIR. Then you have been at Brink Drones, also in the public safety space. Now you're at Aerodome, new entrant into the DFR. Can you give us a little rundown. I know a little bit, of course. I'm sure all of you read it on Drone Life, but in case you missed it, give us
Yeah.
a little rundown about how Aerodome is really different than what's available today.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. And I think the most appropriate place to start is probably with our two co-founders, Rahul Sidhu and Kenaniah Cerny. For the past about 8 to 10 years now, they've been building a company called Spider Tech, which is a software platform that does community engagement with public safety agencies. Rahul was former full-time firefighter, full-time law enforcement. He also did some EMS work in his time. So he's got public safety in his blood, in his core, but he's also got kind of this rare mix of tech software entrepreneur, which is a really interesting blend. And oh, by the way, he's a manned pilot, so he flies fixed wings. And our CTO Kenaniah is an absolutely incredible software engineer with 20 plus years of experience at this point. So when I met them, the company didn't exist. It was still an idea. And Rahul, at kind of early 2020, right after Chula started doing DFR, he was a reserve commander, air commander over at Redondo Beach PD in Southern California. So he started flying DFR at Redondo Beach PD. And, you know, over the couple of years that he was doing it, he saw a lot of areas where could be improvement from not only just a software perspective, but also hardware. So I think it's important to kind of set that stage of where the co-founders have come from, and the fact that Rahul personally has about 1,500 DFR flights under his belt. So he's done this and understands what the end user and the operator needs. So, our mission at Aerodome is to build the future of air support. We don't view this as a close proximity, patrol-led DFR mission. We truly are trying to replace airships and democratize air support. So what does that mean? You have to have an underlying software operating system to ensure that your radars and your RF sensors and your ADS-B feeds and everything coming in from an airspace awareness, which ties into BVLOS, which we've already talked about. But the hardware part of this is critically important in terms of the dock, the drone, the payload. But, really the mission for DFR is to reduce response times, right? Have a force multiplier when it comes to resources. Most police departments in the US today are still understaffed and under their sworn number. So they need force multipliers. And then it's also it's a life-saving technique. There's a reason why DFR is everywhere right now in our industry. And everybody seems to be talking about it. There's new companies popping up because, my thesis in this industry is we need to do things that matter, like important things for society and communities. And when you hear Chula Vista talk about, not having to send a patrol officer because they were able to identify that it was an airsoft gun and not a real gun, or they were able to locate a kid that had, gotten out of their home and the parents couldn't find them, and the DFR program was able to find that kid and get him safely home. Like, these are things that really matter. And so that's why we're really passionate about it at Aerodome. But yeah, we are basically deploying drone stations that are a combination of our software and hardware partners that we have, and responding to calls for service. Our vision at Aerodome is multi-station, multi-drone, fully remote, fully autonomous. That could take a decade to get to, but that's our end state. And we've built out phases to get to that point. But I think most importantly is, of course, our software. So every feature is really designed for DFR and for law enforcement in terms of their CAD integration. So we'll be able to get the call for service immediately into the software, open up the doors of the drone dock, deploy the drone within 10 seconds, get it there in less than 3 minutes. These are all metrics that have to happen, and really software is going to power it. And so we offer the full thing. So services, software, hardware. We have some amazing exclusive hardware partnerships that we're going out to market with for DFR. So that's kind of the high level what we're trying to do at Aerodome. And we're hard at work and talking to a lot of agencies at the moment and doing a lot of demos. So if anyone's interested in a demo, feel free to send me a message. Happy to do it.
So the one thing that I do want to touch on, because I think that this is relevant, right? This is a subscription-based service. So if you're a tiny community and you only need 2, that's different than if you're a really large, right? So it's kind of scales naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything is an annual subscription model with the hardware on lease, because our industry works on typically about 18-month cycles in terms of new hardware. So the minute that new drone comes out, they want it, right? And they want to be able to turn in the old system. So across the hardware stack that we have, everything is on lease. It's based on a X nautical mile radius around each station, and it's really based on a 3-minute response time. So if you can get to a call for service within about 3 minutes, you're going to beat ground patrol there the high majority of the time. So this is the way that we're approaching it from a subscription model, multi-year subscription model. And we try to be kind of I don't like the term, but it is a one-stop shop when it comes to DFR, and DFR is all we're focused on.
Interesting. Okay. So what would you want to, if you look at kind of the next couple of years, so obviously, the 5 to 10 year vision is, we don't have to touch it. It's totally BVLOS, but there is a sort of interim implementation.
Sure. Yeah, it's going to be a phased approach based on regulation and existing technology. But what we see is one human in the loop that's remotely piloting from the real-time crime center, from their dispatch center, that is really just a safety redundancy. Because the way that we've built the system is module based. So from your air traffic awareness to your flight ops to your community engagement and being very transparent and showing the flight metrics from that day, showing the calls or different success metrics, both from a piloting perspective, but then also a community perspective. Automated flight logs for evidence retention purposes. Again, everything is just geared towards law enforcement from a module basis. So, I think that's a really important part of the solution for everybody. And I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time with, some of the DFR agencies and the people that stood them up. And, I've tried to listen as closely as I possibly can to understand what the needs are. And, we view it in the future as a combination of rotorcraft for certain mission sets, and then a VTOL fixed wing, and everything in a box. We're big proponents of being able to hot swap batteries. Contact charging just takes too long. So being able to quickly replace a battery set and go, opening the doors very quickly, having full onboard HVAC for the very cold environments, very hot environments. There's a lot of things that have to happen from a robotics and a software perspective to really have this be a single person in the loop type of mission. So that's how we're viewing it, and how we're building the software around that kind of operating picture that Rahul's been a part of as an operator.
And talk a little bit about kind of what's the training burden, what's the level of expertise that you need there? What's the, what are the requirements for pilots? And
sure. Well, part of the services that we offer is full training, but when it comes to the software, our methodology was like, when you hand somebody an iPhone, do you need to train them? No, not really. The software that we've built, in our opinion, is intuitive enough to where it's incredibly limited on the training. It's really more about the hardware training, which, everyone on this call is an expert of. That's really where you need to spend the time, is understanding how to operate the gimbal and the camera and the zoom and firmware updates. It's really, the training is purely on the hardware side. With our air traffic awareness and airspace awareness sensors, that's a set it and leave it thing. Upon installation, it's really a one-time thing where, you dial in the confines of the jurisdiction, and then you really don't have to do much from there. But in terms of our software, there's almost no, this is what this button does. It's very, very easy, very, very intuitive. And we do not want to spend a lot of time having to train folks on the software aspect of the solution.
Great. So super interesting, because it seems to me like, when I do read about what's happening in Dubai and overseas, that is sort of the model that we're definitely moving to, is this BVLOS drone in a dock, I don't know, every time I use the word autonomous, I get myself in trouble, but no
Automate.
hands-on pilot.
But to Brett's point, I think that what you'll also see in the future is that one operator can operate many drones from
Oh,
a drone
absolutely.
responder. That way, you're not having one pilot to one
That's right,
operation.
Charles. Yeah, and everything is mouse and keyboard controlled. The dock actually holds, call it the RC Plus controller. So that's your pilot. And yeah, you can very easily within the software switch drones, switch stations, fly everything in your fleet from one common operating picture, which is our goal is just to reduce cognitive load. And one thing that we've done within the software that's really unique to what we do is we've created augmented reality overlays. So as you're flying, that live video is going to have street names, very nicely painted on the roads. You're going to be able to click an address, get that address, whether that's commercial or residential, and really reduce cognitive load while you're operating and flying. And most importantly, like, it's great if the drone pilot can see what's going on, but you have to be able to easily share live video, right? So directly within the software, you can send out what we call spectator links. So it's either a text message or an email. It's just a hyperlink that's browser based, and you're going to get a limited feature set and a limited amount of data within the spectator feed, because that's not what it's for. You're going to get the call for service, what drones in the air, and basic telemetry data. But if the chief is not on site, or watch commander is not on site, you can very easily in the software just send them live video and or screenshots of what you see. So
Right.
situational awareness for all stakeholders is really, really important to the adoption of DFR.
So Brett, what are your current platforms that are compatible, and what's the future hold for expansion?
Sure. So today, M30T, M350, H20T, H20N. We have a really exciting VTOL fixed wing partnership that we're going to be announcing early next year. And that's a VTOL fixed wing that has a 2-hour uptime, about a 40-minute hover time, an incredible platform with great optics and an integrated box. So again, we think that drone, combination of VTOL fixed wing and rotor is going to satisfy most cities and terrains and things like that. We're really bullish on radar when it comes to the airspace awareness aspect of this. I understand there's other sensors out there that DFR agencies are using, but they're restricted in terms of range. A lot of times it's going to have to be, in good weather during daytime. Radar is a tried and true technology that the FAA trusts and understands. And we really think radar is going to be a great safety redundancy when it comes to your kind of own localized air traffic awareness, which is what we're building.
Great.
And then, I forgot the drone dock, of course. We have amazing partners over at Hextronics that's building the first ever M350 dock. Some folks were probably down in Chula Vista a couple of weeks ago at the IDES conference. We had that there. So people could see the way, you can have 8 batteries sitting in trays, having arms come up and pull out and hot swap in real time, rapid deployment. So we have some amazing partners that we've built out, and we're working together to really, again, offer the full solution to the market, as opposed to, poor PDs having to go to 5-6 different vendors. And the admin lift is such a nightmare for them that they just say, I'm good with this. I'm going to pass. Try and make it
Any future to work with like Live 911 or anything like that, where it's integrated into your system, or is it always going to be like a standalone system?
No, we want to integrate with existing workflows, whatever the PD's using. We'll integrate with any CAD system that they're using, free of charge. That's a really core competency of our technical team, is CAD integrations. And then, we absolutely already have a Live 911 integration. So we've been working closely with Higher Ground, and that's really, when it comes to jumping that call, Tim, as all too well, that's the key. So having a Live 911 integration, being able to hear that audio of the call, determine the location, you can get that drone on scene while they're still on the call in a lot of cases. So Live 911 integration is critically important to the speed aspect of DFR.
All right. super interesting stuff. Can't wait to see what happens. I'm dying to hear about the fixed wing VTOL. I guess I have to wait till earlier next year. Did not get the inside scoop on that, people, just so you know. But that's fascinating. I'm sure we will hear a lot more about it. One thing I wanted to comment before we shift over to talking about what the London Fire Brigade is doing here is we did have a question come in asking, if you do see a rogue drone, if there is someone interfering with operations, what do you do about it? Our friends at the FAA did suggest a great resource for that, which is if you go on FAA.gov and search for the state fact sheet, it does bring up a fact sheet that gives guidelines to state and local law enforcement and sort of lays out what to do in that case. So good place to start is FAA.gov for that. Tim, does that meet your understanding?
Yeah, no, that's great. It's the question is it's a complicated question. Obviously, Charles hit on it a little bit about, there are some states that have laws that say that if you interfere with mostly manned operation of manned aircraft, then there are criminal penalties where an officer can make an arrest there on the spot. But it really is not every state has it, and we've had in California some pretty blatant arrests for that, and they don't prosecute. The DA's office refuses to prosecute. So we're still, again, behind the times in where we should be with legislation to protect, sensitive law enforcement operations.
Yeah.
But I do know that there are a lot of cities that have ordinances, and this has actually been challenged in court. So there's actually a court decision that backs us up where you can regulate the takeoff and landing of a drone from certain properties, so city properties, city parks. So I know a lot of the ports have this ordinance where you cannot take off or land a drone from the property itself. So that is one way to get around regulating the airspace, is you can regulate the actual ground operations.
Okay, and Charles did put that link to the document I was referring to into the chat if anybody needs that. All right, Lee, we're focusing our attention on you now. Sorry. No, we're so excited to kind of have you with us and talk about kind of how the London Fire Brigade is executing on their drone program, what the benefits are, what you're using it for. And I also am always interested to hear kind of how the community responds to that, because that I think is a significant barrier still for every public safety agency.
Yeah. So what do you want to know from the start, or do you want to like a condensed version of where we came from to where we are now? That sort of thing?
Give us the quick and dirty, and then we'll ask questions.
Yeah, so I mean, briefly touched on it already. In 2017, big tower fire, a load of recommendations came out. Drones were one of them. I don't particularly think that drones would have changed the outcome of that particular incident. It was a pretty difficult one. But anyway, recommendations were we looked into drones. I quickly did a market research. So rather than reinvent the wheel, went out to see who was using drones, how they was using drones, what drones, went to the drone shows, obviously. Then trod that very treacle field of, do we use DJI or Ariane or I think it was Unique back then. But anyway, we went with what we thought was the best. Got the drones, so we got the DJI stuff, but I had to go and do all the boring stuff, all the admin, all the health and safety, all the GDPR. I think I was chatting to Brett about this yesterday, like some of the unsung stuff that you have to go through to get your drone programs off the ground. My friend did all the technical stuff, so that's all like the glory hunting bits and pieces. But he was able to not cut corners, because I can't really say that, but what we did was we managed to smooth some palms and managed to slide our drone program from nothing, an idea, to a full operating program within 9 months. So that's pretty quick, considering that our department, if it's like most other departments, is just like red tape central, where you're just like banging your head up against the brick wall. But anyway, we went forward. We managed to get our very first mission was a leisure centre under reconstruction. got called to it. We called it 10 pumps. I think they called it alarms, 10 alarm fire. But we turned up. There were cylinders reported, which is always a firefighter's nightmare because it means you have to expand the safety zone out to 400 meters, stop every traffic. But they said, "Oh, can you get your drone up?" So we said, "Of course we could. That's why we're here." Put the drone up, and it turned out to be rolls of roofing felt that looked like cylinders. So they was able to say, "No, stop, bring all the cordons back in," and got the fire out quicker because they didn't have to put so much. So that proved the concept of the drone with the very first incident that it got turned out to. So that was a win for us. Fast forward a couple of more years, I started, because I always say to people, don't just be a drone team, always evolve, always push. And then I met Charles in about 20, I want to say 18 or 19 at one of our shows over here. We started discussing drone programs, and Charles integrated me with like people like Rich Katanis, Fred Carlson, Michael Leo. So I started to pick up at people's brains about what they were doing. So then I started to push the hazmat drones. So that's what I've been doing. And then we've more recently been really heavily pushing indoor drones for the Avatas and the Brinks alike. So basically we've managed to expand. I know this comes as a shock to Brett when I told him yesterday, because London's got like 9 million people in it, but we're only one team of 2 people with 4 drones at any one time. And so we've just got 2 people with 4 drones manning the city of 9 million. It's fine. We get through
Like
it.
your superheroes. You only need one Superman, right? it's all good.
Well, it was, and I mean, most people would understand this. So when we first had our drone program, because we was trying to push the education up, we obviously had our select number of calls we went on, and it turned out to them. But the officers, because they didn't know about it, didn't really ask for it. But obviously through education, through shows, through talking about it, the upscale of the drone started to take effect. And then we had some, they called them wildfires. They were just grass fires in London. There's nothing wild about them. But it was really dry summer, and there was lots of fires going on. And then because we'd done some good work with the officers educating them, it was like, we need a drone, we need the drone, we need the drone. And it was like, it was so busy. We like had to get people to come and take over the drone team while they was actually at work, because they hadn't slept for like 18 hours just going to all these fires throughout the day. But that's through the education of the drone, and it actually helped them with the thermals, where the fire was going, sighting appliances. So basically we've seen an upturn in all our incidents. So when we first started, we had 50 calls, I'd say 50 to 60 calls in the year. And I know that's not a lot. The police double, treble, quadruple that amount, but the fire brigade, different user cases. But now we're probably looking about 150, 200 a year. So you can see that the rise through, again, user case. And it's also becoming people's mainstream now, because they're so used to it. So it's like, well, we need a drone, we need this, we need that. And we're just looking into expanding into, I think I was talking about Charles about this today. We're going into subsurface, so water ROVs. So we are looking. So some people call it rescue. I definitely call it recovery. So someone's gone in the water. I think we've got a duty of care to make and find that person. We haven't got divers in the London. Well, there's police divers, but they're on like a 4-hour call out. So we as a fire service haven't got any way of subsurface rescue. So ROVs are now becoming quite prevalent. There's a company in America called Deep Tracker, I think. They do. They've got a good ROV. So that's where I'm trying to expand it. And basically anywhere where you think you could put a drone and save a firefighter from going in. So it's firefighter safety, which is paramount. And this is where you'll see a lot of the drones now being used. So my expertise area, I would say, was USAR, Urban Search and Rescue. So very risk critical. I was in Turkey beginning of the year. There's a video if you wanted to see it on the thing. So very risky business, lots of hazards. Where they lost people in Turkey through going into the buildings. We're getting to that stage now where we can put drones into buildings. We can start doing them as the first attack. There's some military-sized drones that will come into the civilian market eventually, which are called, I think they're Black Hornets. I think the FDNY used them in that, was it car park collapse early in the year? There was I think it was a car park collapse, but they used these little black hornets because they're very small and they can go into little voids. But that will be the evolution of rescue now. You'll get robots that will go in. Is it safe? What can you see? Situational awareness, as Brett says. Right, okay, yeah, it's safe for us. Now we can go in, and you'll start seeing, less firefighters going in as a first attack, and then when it's all safe, then they can go in. And that's the area I'm pushing now. So I actually run. I'll wrap this up because I was just sort of time. But so in Turkey, I'm starting to use, because I use the dogs, the live scenting dogs. But once a dog goes into say a house or something, the dog owner loses sight of it. So they can only go by the barks for the dog if they've hit a casualty. But now I've trialed, and there's some other videos which you could release it later. So we're putting in the dog, and then we're flying the Avata in with it. So I'm showing the dog handler where the dog is running through the Avata camera, because we use the lights on it, the Fox Fury lights. So now we've just been trialing using dogs and drones together, because some dogs react to drones, don't they? They want to try and eat them out of the air. But we tried that first to make sure the drone didn't get eaten out of the air, and then we tried it on scenario-based stuff, and then we went to more sort of non-sterile environments, and it's proved really a real good concept now. So all we need is to get a way of getting a sound through the drone, so we could broadcast sort of maybe dog handlers calls. So when the dog's deep penetrated, the drone's in it, and you could see, like the Mavic 2 has got the you could speak for it, can't you? It's got the sound system. Maybe eventually you'd probably be able to do that with a smaller drone. And then you've got situational awareness for the dog handler, and you can see what the dog's doing. So that's where we've gone from, and now we're making big advancements to try and push the capability for the future.
So Lee, there's something you skipped that I think is a really important talking point of your program. And I had the pleasure to meet with Lee in London at a pub of his choice. And we talked about the program, and what I found fascinating, which really isn't done much in America. Can you talk to the fact of how you guys don't purchase your drones, but you actually lease them from a vendor, and by leasing them, you get updated equipment, easy repairs, that kind of thing. I think that's a really good talking point as an option for purchasing.
Okay, yeah. So it kind of touches on what Brett said about the longevity of kit as well in his earlier conversation. So going right back to the beginning of our project, because it was London Fire Brigade, they'd never got any money. It was like, we want a drone program for free, basically. But what it actually was is that we need a drone program on a trial, and you've got £10,000 to do it, right? So £10,000 buys you what? A Mavic 2 Enterprise? That's about it. But so back then I was like, scratch. What do we do? So to get 6 pilots trained, it's £1,000 each. I've got £4,000 left in my budget. So I just approached the company. I approached a couple of companies. I said, I've got this. What do I get for it? And there's like, well, you can have a Phantom and something else. I was like, okay. So I went to another company and I said, would you lease? I said, would you lease me the drones? Because you do rental. So would you lease me a package? He said, okay, what would you be looking at? And at that time, we said we want the M210 with the XT2 camera and Z5 or whatever, Z10 or whatever it's called, and a Phantom 4 so pilots can train on something. They went, okay, yeah, we can do that for how much did I have left in the budget? So £6,000. It's £4,000 left in budget. I needed 2 months worth. But because we don't pay VAT, I managed to come in under the budget for £2,000 a month each. So I managed to get the whole drone program on budget. So what we did from there is that we said, would you extend that for 6 months? Because obviously the trial was a success. They went, yeah. And then eventually it became a year-on-year. And they called it the full stack program. So basically what we do is we pick bits that we want. So we got the 350 with the RC pluses. We get an M3T. We get an Avata, we get the Teradek live streaming device, and we get 24-hour cover. So when there was a TB55 battery issue a couple of years ago, and they grounded all of the drones, we was able to fly because we was able to switch out the drone, get the Inspire, and we remained airworthy, if that makes sense. So that's a year-on-year lease, and we change our kit every year. So we're always staying ahead of the curve with the kit. And it doesn't depreciate, and you don't get all the software lags, because there was a brigade, I won't mention them, but they got to the end of their life of their kit, and they was like, well, you can't sell it, you just got to destroy it. And I was like, what? They wouldn't sell their drones on, so they had to destroy all the drones. And I think there's a lot of departments that can't afford the good drones, and they fail to get drones into their team. And I think I think there should be more scope for teams to be able to lease their kit, because I think it works. So
That's kind of
Excellent. Thank
brilliant. Really.
It is brilliant.
I think sometimes companies look at the money making side of it, and maybe it's not as cost effective for them. But I think that if there was enough people that sort of vied for it, I think that some companies would sit up and listen, because there must be a way for them. If a piece of kit's a year old and then you sell that kit into the rental market or to someone else, another team who are at a reduced rate, you're still not losing the money. But I think it worked for us, and we would always continue to do this until the end of our program. So,
And perfectly aligned with what you're doing, Brett. That's,
I was
that's
just gonna
kind of
say,
exactly what.
I appreciate you proving out the thesis. And frankly, if you structure it the right way, it's economically more viable for the company to do it. And it's so much easier. Like you just said, I hear a lot of agencies say that they think they're going to get 5 years out of their systems. And I think that's a lack of understanding of how quickly firmware and hardware and everything changes. And then what happens at the end of that year 5? It's trash, it's scrapped. It's
the drone industry joke, right? That's
Totally.
so 2022. We are
The lease model is so 23 and 24.
exactly. You guys, that went so fast. I enjoyed speaking to both of you. Thank you both so much. Lee, I'm sorry we had technical difficulties. We couldn't get the video up, which was disappointing.
no, it's fine. It's all good.
Yeah, I'm disappointed, but thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Once again, Charles, for those who were not here at the very, very beginning, we hope that we will see all of you in Busch Gardens this spring. Charles, I'm pointing the wrong direction because it's mirrored.
Yes, Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, Virginia, March 12th and 13th, 2024. It's going to be a huge event, 400 plus people, a lot of exhibitors. I'll just say that, again, this is a Drone Responders joint program, and join both of us. Subscribe to Drone Life and DroneResponders.org. They're both free, and there's a lot of information at both places. And Miriam, Tim, as always, you guys are wonderful. Thanks for our guest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you all for being here. If you missed any part of this or you'd like to pass it on, this will be posted in the future on the Drone Life TV YouTube channel. Thanks, everyone. Hope to see you next month.